going to discuss. I'm going to focus upon how are you going to break it down? What is the structure of writing task 1? What things do you need to look out for while you are attempting your writing task 1? What are the things that examiner will look out for? How to avoid some sort of mistakes, and what are the tips that you're going to follow through. So this question that I'm going to discuss today was recently asked, and it was asked on 12th of October this year, 2023. So let's quickly read the question. The question says, the given two tables show the exchange students from European universities to Australia between 2007 and 2009. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and making comparisons where relevant. So as usual, we'll start with the question itself. We'll understand the question properly, and then we'll move on to the designated, the answer type that we're going to follow. So let's see. There are two tables. What are they telling us? Exchange students. What does we mean by exchange students? That's students who went to this particular country, and then, the exchange of students. How many students went there? How many students came back to European universities, to Australia between the years are given 2007 and 2009. Now, this question, the second line of this question is important that we'll focus upon. Summarize the information. So this is what the examiner is asking or instructing you to do. So number one, summarize the information. That means, see, the data is already there, right? It is already presented in a very well formatted manner of a table. So while we are writing report, our focus or our goal is not to just reiterate the data that is given to us. Instead, make a report, take inference out of it, and then write a report, right? That means that we are going to analyze the data. We're going to follow it, compare it, make some changes, and then summarize it into a report. And not just simply quote whatever has been written, because that does not show any linguistic skills. That just shows that you know how to read, right? Anybody can go ahead and write, France had 37 students in 2007, then 58 in 2009. Sweden has this much, but that is not how we approach this report. First, you need to analyze, select and report the highlight, the main features, then go ahead, make comparisons, and then analyze or give a proper structure report, right? So summarize, so we'll be summarizing the information. That there's a lot of information we have here. We have so many countries, we have so much data, so many numbers. How we are going to summarize into 150 words? That is the word requirement, which will we just come to in shortly. How we're going to summarize this. Then how we're going to select, nitpick some data, right? Some data is more important than the other ones. So how are we going to select those features? How are we going to group the features so that we can summarize it also, right? How can we make sure that we can take these two countries and write them together using words like respectively and similarly, so that we can also summarize a report. And main features. Main features means what are the important highlights, and make comparisons. Now, how do I make comparisons? Let's say that if a country had 50 students who came in and 100 students who went, right? Let's say in 2007 and in 2009. Let's take a general example. Let me just clear my screen first. Yes. So let's say in 2007, there were inflow of 50 students. In 2009, there were 100 students. Now, can you see a pattern between these two numbers? Are these two numbers anywhere related? So yes, this is half of this, right? That means we can write this information as in 2007, 50 students went to Australia. However, in 2009, it was double the number. So this is how you make comparisons. And not in just this case, but even if the number is like something like 55 and 100 and let's say 4, with this case also, you can see that there is, again, this number is almost the double of this number. So now we can use the word as approximately, right? We can still make that comparison. So it doesn't always have to be the exact multiple or factor of the other number, but we can still make the comparison. Other words could be like, quarterly, that is 1/4, 1/6, 1/3, 3 times. All of these are just ways you can compare data. So this is just the introduction that I'm giving you before we head on to the real report or the sample report that we have written for you. Now, before I start any of this, let's have a general idea of your writing task 1. So for your IELTS writing, you're given 1 hour, your complete writing exam, which includes 2 tasks, task 1 and task 2. So how we generally divide this time. So in my previous sessions also, we have talked multiple times about how we recommend you to divide this time. So we generally allot 20 minutes to writing task 1 and 40 minutes to task 2. This is to ensure that you have the maximum optimization of your time, because task 1 is relatively easier and also requires less word limit. So you can complete it in 20 minutes and then move on to your writing task 2. This is a better, but again, this could be according to your convenience, that you, when you practice, you see how much time are you taking for task 1, how much time do you need for task 2, and how do you manage it. But this is the recommended time limit. Now, from these 20 minutes, we are supposed to write 150 words, right? 150 words in writing task 1, that's the requirement. But optimal word limit is again 180 words. So write around 180 words, 190 words, but do not exceed 200 words, because that would be just too wordy. We do not want to make it too wordy. We want to make it concise, to the point, and make sure the message is conveyed across, not just random babble of words. All right. So when we talk about these 150 words, you can take about 5 minutes to just analyze this table, right? What are the highlights? What are the main features? How am I going to group the data? Because I'm going to write 4 paragraphs. What are these 4 paragraphs going to be? Introduction, then the overall, where we'll be summarizing the main points, then a body paragraph 1, the data, and body paragraph 2 for the data. So how I'm going to club it all into 2 body paragraphs, what I'm going to talk about in body paragraph 1 and then body paragraph 2, you have to make this grouping before you start writing. This is very important. Now let's come to the table. So in this table, take a minute and see if you can analyze some of the data. Can you see there are some features striking out than the other, some things that stand out, or something that is like similar, constant, any sort of information that you can figure out from this. So take a minute and see what you can find out about this. All right. So let me just help you with it. And while you are assessing your table, let's go and see what are the things that we find. So in the first table, we are given exchange students from universities in Europe to Australia. So here we are going to talk about the students who moved from Europe to Australia. This is this, right? So I always prefer to write it in short words so that I'm more clear on it, because this table is about from Australia to Europe. Now this gives me a clear picture that what is going on in these tables. So in the first table, if you see, can you spot the highest value? That's the easiest way to go about it. Can you spot the highest value? Yes. So this is the highest value in 2007, that is associated with France. And what is the lowest value? That is Germany. In 2009, the highest value remains the same, but the lowest goes to, let's say it is UK. All right. So this is what we have identified here. Just a major thing. We're not doing anything. We're just identifying the main features. Do not focus on anything right now, just the highest and lowest, or something that has remained stagnant. So Netherlands has remained stagnant. So these are the 3 things that we have identified. So this is the topmost, this is the bottommost, and this is stagnant. T for top, B for bottom, and S for stagnant. That's it. Let's move on to the second chart. Again, the highest number in 2007 is France. So see, there's a pattern. Now we are figuring out the pattern. So we have seen the France, and in 2009 also it is France. Let's come to the lowest value. So the lowest value here again is Germany. There's your pattern. And in 2009, the lowest value is, yes, Netherlands. Right? Okay. And even Germany has very close to the lowest value, something of that, right? So this is how we have identified the first pattern. Anything else that you can see in this particular table, something that you see is highest, lowest, or maybe stagnant, you can see. So if you look closely, you can identify one value that is stagnant here is total number of students. The total number of students remains 152. So these are the things that we identified in the overall. Now, why are these important? I'll just get back to it also. But this is how we studied that overall table. Now, I'm not supposed to memorize the data or something because it's not my job right now. I'm supposed to write a report on it. So this is how we identify the features. So let's move on. So the first paragraph. I'll just come to these markings also, but let's understand the first paragraph. So in this very first paragraph, the introduction, what are you supposed to do? So the introduction is very simple. It's as simple as it can get, is you paraphrase the question. So what was the question for you? Let me just go back to the question so we can read the question as well. So here was the question. Yes, this was the question. The given two tables show the exchange of students from European universities to Australia between 2007 and 2009. So our introduction says, the chart depicts, the chart depicts, instead of saying shows, we used word depicts, influx of exchange of students. This is something we've added on our own, from European countries to Australia and vice versa. Because you see, there are two tables. One is from Europe to Australia, and then the other is Australia to Europe in 2009 and 2007. So in introduction, we'll paraphrase the question. If you're given the timeline, you write that. Sometimes what happens, the timeline is not mentioned in the question, it is mentioned in the picture. So remember to add the timeline. If you are given any other detail, let's say categories you're given, right? In this question also, we can talk about the countries that are given, right? If you want, you can definitely mention the countries are France, Sweden, UK, Germany, Netherlands, and any other information that you seem is relevant. All right. So this is the introduction. No data to be given here. No numbers to be written down here. Just paraphrase the question. If a timeline is given, if a category is given, you can definitely mention it. And you make sure that you do not write your question as it is. Whatever it was given to you, you have to make sure that you use synonyms, you refine the statement, and you change it. Let's move on to the overall. Now, this is important. Now, for the overall, when I say overall paragraph, it means that you're highlighting the main features. So whatever we did here in these charts that we talked about, we talked about Europe and France and Netherlands and Germany, that is your highest or lowest values and the stagnant values, right? So this is what we're going to talk about in overall. Now, for you to understand this better, have a look here. If this is a line chart, let's say this is the timeline, right? 2007, 2009, 2011, and so on, right? And then this is like, let's say, number of students. This is not related to this particular data, but I'm just giving you an example. Let's say it starts from 0, 50, 100, then goes 150, 200. So this is a sample line graph, right? What are the main things that you see here? On the very first glance, like do not think about it. The main things, on the very first glance, what do we see? We see few things. For example, we see there's a lowest point, there's a highest point, and there's a period of stagnancy. These are the main features, right? This is what we're going to talk about in overall. You see, so even in this table graph, try to visualize it as a line graph if you want, if that helps you, or you can just simply code the data. But these are the overall points that whenever you set your glance on the data, first glance, there are some things that strike out. What are those things? If we see this period, this is a fluctuating period. This is a lowest period where the students were something around, let's say 9 or not 9, but around 2, 3. Okay. This is the highest period when the number of students was around 201 or 202. This is a stagnant period from 2000, let's say 10 to 2014. This is what we talk about in overall. Okay, let me just clear my drawings. Yes. So when you are talking in the overall, remember, we're going to quote the overall story that we see in this particular data, but we are not going to quote any data. No data here. What do I mean by that? No figures are to be written, right? That it was 33, then it became 27. No, we're not going to give data, just the overall picture highlights. So you see, overall, the total number of exchange students to Australia experienced growth in 2009. See, this is what you are going to talk about total. It was 189. It then moved to 226. This was one thing. Whereas the figures for students from Australia to Europe remained constant. So yes, the total here increased, but here it remained constant. The overall picture of the idea. Notably, this is a linker that we have used. Please remember this linker. The data highlights dynamic exchange patterns with Germany and France being pivotal in inflow and outflow. You see that the dynamic exchange patterns are with France and Germany. What are those? We can discuss them in the body paragraphs, but that means Germany had the lowest and France always had the highest. So this is how you write an overall. Let's just move on to the body paragraphs. So the next slide, body paragraph 3. Now, Dham will start quoting the data. All right, you can see the numbers here. Now, this is how we are going to start with the numbers. So when we are talking about the numbers, I already told you we have 2 body paragraphs, right? So how are we going to divide the data? You can always choose to go for first table in the first paragraph, then second table in the second paragraph, or you can choose 3 highest countries, compare them in body paragraph 1, and then compare the other 2 in the body paragraph 2. Again, this grouping is something very subjective to you, but it's always easier to go if you're given 2 charts, 2 tables. It is always easier to segregate them and have one in body paragraph 3 and the other in the paragraph 4. So let's read this. France had the highest number of 61 exchange students to Australia in 2007. This is what we marked here in the table. Let's just clear all the things and then we can restart. Yes. So France had the highest exchange, 61 in 2007, which dropped slightly to 60 in 2009. Sweden saw the modest increase from 34 to 42. Sweden saw from 34 to 42, while UK numbers declined from 31 to 26. You see how we are comparing these, how we are summarizing the data. I'm not just simply quoting, oh, France had 61 in 2007, then 60 in 2009. We have used some words here. We have used some linkers in between. Then Germany experienced a significant surge from 27 to 62, highest in 2009, and the Netherlands remained constant 36 and 40 years. All right. Some few things to note here. Number one, you see dropped slightly. This is, first of all, the verb here is dropped. And what is the modifier used with it? It is slightly. How it dropped? Slightly dropped. Then increase. What kind of increase? Modest increase. This is I'm qualifying my verbs and my nouns if I'm explaining what happened to data, how it happened, right? While UK numbers declined, then significant surge. There was a surge. What kind of surge was it? It was a significant one. So this is how you coach your data. So you can look for other words, other collocations that go with surge, right? A major surge. You can also say exponential surge, right? Exponential is when something goes very rapidly, right? So there are words. You have significant. Let me just quickly wait. So there are different words. We have slightly, moderately. Then we have significant. Then we have rapidly. And we have exponentially. You see, there's an order why I've written them like this. You can also find other words, but there's an order to this, right? Slightly means very less, right? You can also add one more word here is marginally. So there's like plenty of words you can find collocations to go with your nouns and verbs, but this is a order that I'm going to highlight here. Moderately is like something of moderate value, in comparison, relatively, right? So if I say that 34 to 42 is a huge major jump, then 30, let's say 30, okay, let me just hear. If 34 to 42 is the highest gap in the in our particular data, then if I'm talking about 22 to 25, then this is moderate. Significant and rapidly would be like something very huge jump. For example, 34 to 50. Exponentially would be like 34 to around something like 77 or maybe 80. So there's an order to it, right? Exponentially is like a very big change. Slightly is a less change. So you can read about these words more, you can learn these words and use them in your writing task 1. Let's move on to the next slide. Now I've chosen to keep both the tables separate. So here I'm going to talk about this data. France had the highest number of exchange students in Australia in both years, 37 and 58. Conversely, the linker I've used, the number of for Sweden and UK declined from 33 to 27 and 32 to 23 respectively. Now see how I clubbed Sweden and UK? Because both of them were declining, so I clubbed them, right? You can also add Germany here if you want, and then use respectively, right? But you can also give it a different shot. So this is how we are going to compare the data, not just simply write it down, but compare it with the other places also. For example, if I'm saying that France had the highest, then I can write, whereas Germany had the lowest. This is comparison. This is not just simply quoting the data, but inferring from it, analyzing it, and then writing down the inference from it. Then Germany, with the lowest number of exchange students in 2007, witnessed an increase from 18 to 26, while the number for the Netherlands decreased from 32 to 18 to become the country with the lowest number of exchange students to Australian universities. So you see, I used while and then I compared Germany and Netherlands because one was increasing slightly, one was decreasing. That's how you can compare your data. Now, can you spot any other significant collocations that we use, like, for example, drop slightly in this particular paragraph? So see, what we have written is like highest number. That is one way to quote your data. And then we have, yes. So we don't have any significant collocations here, but we have written them with modifiers like, the lowest number. Then we have used linkers here, conversely. And we have used other conjunctions like while to compare between the datas. Then we have, yes. So this is how we have portrayed the data here. Let's move on. So this is a final chart report that we have written here. Let's see the introduction, paraphrase the question. Then overall, we have simply mentioned the major highlights. Paragraph 1, chart 1, chart 2, table 2. Now, this is how you can write down your entire final report. Now, in some places, you're told to write the overall in the last, which is again acceptable. But I always suggest my students to write it in the second paragraph, because even if you run out of time, you at least have your overall written and you have written it well within the time. Like even if you're managing your time, you can write the overall first because it is an important or essential part of your writing task 1, because it gives the examiner the idea of what inferences did you make, right? That is more important than you just simply quoting the data. That is why overall is important. So if you can write it in the second paragraph, that is more favorable for you than writing it at the last. All right, so let's move on quickly to the tips that we're going to discuss. So the things that we're going to write. Now, before I discuss these tips, the assessment criteria. So the assessment criteria for writing task 1 is task response or task assessment, task achievement, right? Task achievement refers to that whatever was asked to you, you achieved those things. Whatever was asked of you, you summarize the points, you compare the points, you highlight the main features. That is your task achievement. Coherence and cohesion, you use linkers. Linkers like conversely, we used one here. We used notably. Other than that, you can use moreover, however, on the contrary, although, etc. Grammatical range and accuracy, as always, your punctuation should be correct, your subject-verb agreement should be correct. All of these constitute your grammatical accuracy. When I talk about range, you have to use complex compound sentences. You can add in one or two different tenses. Very important in report writing, tenses, right? If the data is quoted in past, you always mention it in past. Since we were talking about 2007 and 2009, so we took it in past. Or if you're mentioning something of a prediction, then you go for future. For example, by 2025, it will reach by this point. So then you use future tense. Grammatical range, and then we have lexical resource. Lexical resource here would be the collocations that I highlighted. For example, slightly decreased, right? So when you achieve all of these 4 things, you can score well in your writing task 1. And so we use linkers, moreover, however, on the contrary, take care of your spellings, punctuation, grammar, cover all the requirements as I talked about, summarize, highlight, report, and do not forget to compare the data. Do not just give data on one-liners. Do not forget to compare the data. And one more thing, remember, do not write no numbers in overall. As simple as it gets. The overall should not have any data or numbers or figures in it, just the inference. So these are the things that you have to remember. Remember to check your spellings. Remember to add some of the collocations because it cannot be just very plain, right? The report writing, it has to have linkers, those collocations slightly, moderately for you to compare between things. But while you're using them, always remember to know the exact meaning of the word. That what does exponentially mean? If a data is increasing from 35 to 34 to 35, that is not an exponential increase. So you have to make sure that you know the correct meaning of this word also. This is a slight increase. This is a difference. So you remember all of these pointers while you're achieving your task 1. That's all for today. Let me just move on to the last slide. Thank you so much for joining. For more such interactive IELTS sessions and content, please subscribe to LinkedIn and YouTube channel. We keep coming up with more webinars. And if you have any doubts and queries that you want us to answer, please drop them in the comment box so that in the next session, we can definitely address it for you. And if you want to enroll in any of the IELTS Crash courses or comprehensive courses, you can visit our website, www.yunolearning.com, or give us a call at this number. Thank you so much for joining. See you in the next session. Bye-bye.